Are you ready to uncover the secrets that the world has tried to forget? Hidden in plain sight, behind headlines and whispers, are mysteries so strange, so baffling, they still haunt investigators, journalists, and even ordinary people decades later. Today, we're diving into the shadows of history, where facts blur with speculation, and some answers may never come. Imagine walking into a room, knowing something terrible happened there, but the clues vanish as soon as you blink. That's the world of unsolved cases, the kind that leave detectives scratching their heads, journalists chasing leads that disappear into thin air, and ordinary families trapped in questions that have no answers. And what we're about to explore isn't just a story. It's a labyrinth of secrets, twists, and chilling enigmas that will make you question what you think you know about truth. Our first story takes us to a sleepy town that seemed ordinary, almost boring, until one morning when everything changed. The sun had barely risen, birds were just starting to chirp, and the residents were going about their usual routines. But in a small house on the edge of town, a mystery unfolded that would shake the community to its core. The kind of case that made people lock their doors tighter, whisper in hushed tones, and wonder how such darkness could lurk in a place that felt so safe. It all started with a disappearance. Not the dramatic kind you see in movies, where there's a chase or a struggle. This was quiet, almost invisible. Someone simply vanished. No note, no fight, no explanation. The person was there one day, gone the next, leaving behind nothing but confusion and an eerie silence. And that silence, oddly enough, was the loudest thing anyone could hear. Detectives arrived, combing through the house for clues. They checked every corner, every drawer, every hidden space, but it was as if the person had evaporated. No fingerprints out of place, no signs of a struggle, no trace of being taken against their will, just gone. It was the kind of disappearance that doesn't just puzzle authorities, it messes with your mind. How can someone disappear without leaving a mark? Neighbors were interviewed. Everyone said the same thing. The house was quiet, the family normal. Nothing unusual in the days leading up to the disappearance. But as investigators dug deeper, small oddities began to surface. A diary entry that didn't quite match the person's normal handwriting. A neighbor's recollection of a strange visitor, someone no one recognized. And then a series of letters that seemed to hint at secrets nobody in the town knew existed. It was becoming clear that this wasn't just a simple missing person case. Something bigger, something darker was at play. The kind of secret that doesn't reveal itself easily, and the kind of story that makes you ask questions you don't want answers to. And yet, we have to follow the trail, because somewhere in those clues lies the truth, or at least a version of it. As we dive further, you'll notice patterns, strange coincidences, and moments that make you stop and wonder. What is really going on here? Some of the facts seem almost impossible, yet they are documented, reported, and verified. Others feel like fragments of a dream, slipping away the moment you try to hold on to them. And that's the beauty and the terror of unsolved cases. They force us to confront the unknown, to imagine the unimaginable, and to keep searching, even when answers evade us. But before we get too deep into the darkness, let's take a closer look at the first few clues. The things that were noticed by those who lived closest to the events. Things so subtle that at first glance, no one thought much of them. But later, they would become pieces of a puzzle that no one could quite complete. A half-burned note in the fireplace. A faint smell in the kitchen that nobody could explain. A broken chair in a room that seemed perfectly normal the day before. These tiny details, almost laughably insignificant at first, were the first threads of a mystery that would unravel in ways nobody could anticipate. And here's where it gets really strange. The more the investigators looked, the more anomalies they found. Not just in the house, but in the lives of everyone connected to it. Friends who couldn't remember small details. Family members who suddenly changed their stories. Neighbors who seemed unusually nervous when certain names were mentioned.
It was as if the disappearance had opened a door to something much larger. A hidden world of secrets that the town had kept buried for years. By the time the first week had passed, the case had already taken on a life of its own. Reporters began arriving. Townspeople whispered in cafes and grocery stores. And everyone had a theory. None of them matching the others. Some blamed an outsider. Some blamed the family themselves. And some whispered of things too strange to even mention. And all the while, the missing person remained missing. This is just the beginning. As we continue, we'll uncover the hidden letters, mysterious sightings, and inexplicable events that surround this first case. And you'll start to see a pattern, a way that unsolved cases often leave us questioning reality itself. So buckle up. The story is just starting, and once you start peeling back the layers, there's no turning back. The first days after the disappearance were a whirlwind. Investigators arrived with notebooks, cameras, and a seriousness that made the town feel heavier, almost suffocating. They questioned everyone: family, friends, neighbors, even the mailman who had walked past the house every day for years. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Everyone remembered the person as cheerful, normal, the kind of person who blended into daily life without causing a ripple. But as the questions kept coming, the cracks began to appear. The family, obviously shaken, tried to be helpful. They provided timelines, answered questions, and went through every detail of the missing person's routine. But small inconsistencies cropped up almost immediately. Little things, a forgotten appointment, a story that didn't quite match reality, a neighbor's memory that clashed with another's. Each inconsistency was like a pinprick, small on its own, but enough to make the investigators pause. Something wasn't adding up. Then there were the clues. Odd, confusing, and unsettling. The diary found under a loose floorboard was perhaps the strangest. Most of it was mundane. Notes about school, work, friends. But scattered among those pages were cryptic lines that seemed almost like code. Phrases like, "The eyes are always watching," or "Do not trust the shadows" appeared repeatedly. Yet without context, their meaning remained elusive. Some suggested the person might have been involved in something secretive, something they didn't want anyone else to know. Others thought it was just the imagination of someone who liked to write darkly. But in the context of their disappearance, every line now felt like a clue or a warning. Investigators also found the letters the neighbors mentioned, handwritten, unsigned, some even postmarked from nearby towns. The content was strange. References to meetings that never happened, names that nobody could identify, and repeated mentions of a safe place that no one could locate. The handwriting varied too. Some letters seemed rushed, almost messy, while others were neat, precise, and deliberate. Who was sending these letters? And why? Outside the house, the environment itself added to the mystery. There were footprints in the garden, faint but fresh, leading toward the forest that bordered the town. But no one saw anyone leave. A few days later, the rain washed them away, erasing the only physical trace investigators had. Then there was the broken chair in the living room. The family said it had been fine the day before the disappearance, but the chair was now toppled over, with splintered wood and a faint smear of something reddish-brown. Tests revealed it wasn't blood, but it was organic. Some kind of residue that couldn't be explained. As the investigation continued, the media arrived, bringing with them reporters eager for a story. Some focused on the strange letters, others on the diary, and a few on the physical clues in the house. Every theory seemed plausible, yet impossible. Was it foul play? A voluntary disappearance? Something supernatural? Or a combination of everything that made no sense? The town became a pressure cooker of speculation, fear, and curiosity. Witness accounts began to pile up, adding more layers to the mystery. One neighbor claimed to have seen a shadowy figure leaving the house late at night, moving quickly and silently, almost floating rather than walking. Another said they heard a strange humming, low and continuous, coming from the attic, although no one could explain why the missing person would have been there. Some residents reported seeing lights flicker in the windows when no one was home, and a few swore they saw reflections in mirrors that didn't match reality. Fleeting glimpses of someone watching, waiting, but never speaking. Even small details, things most people would overlook, took on new weight. A missing key, a door left unlocked that usually wasn't, an old photograph turned face down. Every tiny anomaly became a clue in the investigators' eyes. It was as if the house itself was hiding secrets, whispering in the language of small inconsistencies that only the observant could understand. By the end of the first week, a pattern began to emerge. The disappearance wasn't random. It had structure. Someone had planned something carefully, leaving traces that were visible only if you knew where to look. The diary, the letters, the footprints, even the residue on the chair, they were all pieces of a puzzle, deliberately scattered. But to what end? And by whom? Authorities brought in experts, handwriting analysts, forensic investigators, psychologists. They examined every word, every smudge, every fragment. Some suggested the diary and letters indicated a person struggling with paranoia or mental stress. Others proposed that someone else had manipulated the environment to make the disappearance look mysterious, planting clues to confuse the investigation. But no conclusion satisfied everyone. The case remained unsolved, even as the days turned into weeks. Even the townspeople began noticing odd things themselves. Shops reported items misplaced or missing. Some residents claimed they felt watched, and a sense of unease settled over the town. It wasn't fear in the traditional sense. It was subtler, a creeping sensation that something hidden was always nearby. Something the town couldn't see, but knew existed. The first case investigation revealed one truth that would haunt everyone involved. Ordinary life can be deceiving. People can vanish without a trace, and clues can be left deliberately or by chance to baffle anyone who tries to follow them. And sometimes, the more you look, the less you find, like searching for shapes in a fog, where the answers shift as soon as you try to grab them. But this is only the beginning. Even after weeks of investigation, the case had more twists to reveal. Clues that were overlooked, witnesses who suddenly remembered critical details, and letters that hadn't yet been fully deciphered. The deeper the investigators dug, the stranger it became, and the more impossible it seemed to solve. And as strange as this first case is, it's not the only mystery waiting for us. Across the world, other unsolved cases mirror this one: vanishings, bizarre letters, unexplained evidence, all pointing to the unsettling truth that some secrets refuse to stay buried. While the first disappearance had the town on edge, the next story took place hundreds of miles away, in a city that prided itself on being orderly and predictable. But even in the most structured places, shadows find a way to creep in. And this next case was proof of that. An unsolved mystery so strange, it seemed almost unreal. Yet the evidence, the witnesses, and the investigation all confirmed that something genuinely unexplainable had occurred. It began late one winter evening. Snow had blanketed the streets, muffling the usual city noises, and the sidewalks were eerily quiet. A wealthy family, known for their philanthropy and influence, reported that one of their own had vanished without warning. No doors forced open, no signs of a struggle, nothing stolen, just gone. The person had been seen by multiple staff members earlier that day, attending to normal routines. By the time the disappearance was noticed, it was as if they had dissolved into thin air. Unlike the first case, which had a small-town intimacy, this one was complex and multi-layered. There were cameras in the hallways, security logs for every door, timestamps for every interaction. And yet, when investigators, no sign of a person leaving, no suspicious visitors. Even the timestamps didn't reveal gaps or anomalies. It was as if the person had never existed beyond that moment in time. The media latched onto the story immediately. Headlines screamed, "Vanished in plain sight," and mystery in the snow, and the public's imagination ran wild. But the real mystery wasn't in the disappearance itself. It was in the details surrounding it. Staff members reported strange occurrences in the days prior. Lights flickering, doors opening on their own, a cold draft in hallways that had no explanation. One housekeeper even claimed to hear faint whispers calling the missing person's name, though she admitted she couldn't tell where the sound came from. Investigators combed through every possible lead. They interviewed staff, friends, business associates, and family members. Everyone confirmed the missing person had seemed perfectly normal, healthy, and stable. No one had reason to leave voluntarily. And yet, as with the first case, inconsistencies appeared. A driver remembered dropping them off at a location that no one else seemed to recognize. A receptionist swore they received a call from the person that never showed up in the phone records. And then there were the notes, handwritten, cryptic, and unsigned, that appeared on the missing person's desk the next morning, hinting at threats or warnings nobody could decode. As investigators compared this case to similar unsolved disappearances, a troubling pattern emerged. Both here and in the first town, the missing individuals had left behind clues that were strange, contradictory, or impossible to interpret fully. Letters, diaries, unexplained residues, anomalous behavior by those around them. It all painted a picture of a puzzle that seemed to taunt anyone trying to solve it. This is where the larger problem began to reveal itself. These cases weren't isolated. They were part of a recurring phenomenon. People vanished under circumstances that defied logic, leaving traces that were tantalizing but incomplete. Investigators realized that each case held pieces of a bigger picture, a puzzle that spanned geography, social class, and even decades. The challenge wasn't just to solve a single disappearance. It was to understand the rules of a pattern that no one had fully recognized, and this pattern had its own signature. In every instance, something unusual preceded the disappearance. A subtle anomaly, a small warning, or an object out of place. The anomalies weren't identical, but they shared a similarity that suggested design rather than coincidence. Whether it was a cryptic diary entry, a fleeting shadow, a strange smell, or a half-seen figure. These events pointed towards something or someone operating in the background, unseen, but orchestrating chaos. The deeper investigators dug, the more they realized that traditional approaches were failing. Standard forensic techniques, interviews, security footage, all provided little insight. The cases demanded a different perspective, a willingness to consider possibilities most people would dismiss. And yet, the truth remained just out of reach, a thread they could follow, but never fully grasp. By now, it became clear that these mysteries were testing more than detective skills. They were testing human perception itself. Could we trust our senses? Could we rely on memory? And perhaps most chilling of all, how much of what we consider normal, safe, and predictable is actually fragile, easily disrupted by forces we cannot see. This second case didn't just mirror the first. it amplified the mystery. It suggested a problem that was bigger than a single person disappearing. A challenge that spanned cities, patterns, and perhaps even decades. Something about these unsolved cases was deliberately hiding from plain sight, leaving only fragments and whispers to those bold enough or foolish enough to seek answers. As we move forward, the connections between these mysteries will become more apparent. We'll explore links, strange coincidences, and patterns that defy chance. And slowly, you'll start to see why investigators describe these disappearances as more than cases. They are puzzles that push the limits of logic and leave even the most rational minds questioning reality itself. By now, it was clear that these unsolved cases weren't isolated incidents. They shared a chilling quality. People vanished, leaving behind fragments, letters, diaries, unexplained objects, anomalies in their daily lives, but never enough to fully explain what happened. Investigators from both the small town and the city began comparing notes, and slowly, patterns started to emerge. The first pattern was subtle but consistent, a precursor to disappearance. In almost every case, something unusual happened, days, sometimes weeks, before the person vanished. It could be a strange visitor, a cryptic note, or a fleeting shadow. At first glance, each event seemed harmless, even dismissible. But retrospectively, they all formed a chain, a warning that something beyond normal comprehension was at play. Experts were called in to analyze these anomalies. Psychologists suggested that the behaviors in diaries or letters indicated stress or paranoia, but nothing pointed to rational fear that could explain the actual disappearances. Forensic analysts reviewed residues, broken objects, and environmental clues, finding patterns that didn't make sense scientifically. One residue, found on furniture in both locations, didn't match any known chemical composition. A detective described it as organic, yet unnatural, like life itself in an unfamiliar form. Witnesses added even more perplexing elements. One neighbor from the first case recalled seeing a figure standing motionless at the edge of the woods at night. Security footage from the second case showed a shadow crossing hallways where no one could have entered. Some witnesses even reported hearing whispers or sounds that defied explanation. Though they weren't always consistent from one person to the next, these discrepancies frustrated investigators. How could multiple reliable witnesses see or hear things differently, yet point toward the same overarching mystery? Then came the letters and diaries. Cryptographers were brought in to decode the messages, hoping that patterns or ciphers could lead to answers. Most of the messages were written in simple language, but contained repeated motifs: eyes, shadows, warnings, and references to places that didn't exist on any map. Analysts speculated about hidden meanings, subconscious messages, or even coordinated interference by an outside force. But nothing could fully account for the vanishings themselves. At the same time, sociologists and criminologists looked at the victims' profiles. Across towns and cities, the people who disappeared shared certain traits: intelligence, curiosity, and independence. They were not reckless, they had no enemies, and they weren't involved in criminal activity. Yet somehow, these very traits seemed to correlate with their selection. It was as if the universe, or whatever orchestrated these disappearances, was drawn to people who noticed anomalies, who asked questions, and who sought answers that others overlooked. Patterns also appeared in timing. Many disappearances occurred in winter months or during transitional periods in the victims' lives, moving homes, changing jobs, or ending relationships. Investigators considered coincidence, but the repetition was statistically significant. Something about transitional moments seemed to make people vulnerable, or perhaps more visible, to whatever was behind the disappearances. The exploration deepened when investigators began re-examining old, unsolved cases from decades earlier. Some files had been closed due to lack of evidence, but rereading the details revealed it became clear that these modern cases were part of a much larger, ongoing phenomenon, one that had been quietly occurring for decades, hidden beneath the radar of mainstream attention. Conflicting theories emerged, as they always do when human minds confront the inexplicable, that these disappearances were orchestrated by an intelligent, hidden force, unknown and undetectable, that moved with purpose and precision. Skeptics scoffed, but each new piece of evidence that defied logical explanation fueled the possibility that there was more at work than mere chance. The complexity increased when investigators tried to cross-reference the cases. Names, dates, and locations were compared for similarities. Subtle overlaps emerged. The same obscure businesses mentioned in letters, roads that connected otherwise unrelated towns, and even occasional sightings of a lone figure in multiple regions. While none of these overlaps provided direct evidence of responsibility, they hinted at a larger network, or perhaps a method that tied these vanishings together. By now, it was no longer just about individual disappearances. It was about recognizing the system behind them. Investigators realized they weren't just chasing missing people. They were following a set of rules, a sequence of events that, if understood, could potentially prevent the next disappearance. But the rules were maddeningly opaque. Every answer seemed to reveal 3 more questions. Every lead led to a dead end, except that dead end itself sometimes pointed to another anomaly waiting to be discovered. Even the public began to notice. People who followed the news reported their own strange experiences. Mislaid objects, fleeting shadows, sounds in empty rooms. Some dismissed these as coincidence, others as hysteria. But when combined with the unsolved cases, a broader picture began to form. Ordinary life itself seemed to bend subtly, warning those who were perceptive enough to notice. And yet, amidst all this exploration, one core truth remained. The deeper you dig, the more the mystery grows. Investigators realized they were not just solving crimes. They were confronting the limits of human understanding. Each clue, each witness account, each residue, each cryptic message was part of a larger narrative. But the story itself remained incomplete. As we continue, we'll explore how these cases intersect, how patterns emerge across time and space, and how the unseen force or sequence of events behind these disappearances operates with chilling precision. What is happening behind the veil of normal life? And how close are we, really, to understanding it? Just when investigators thought they were beginning to understand the emerging patterns, a third case surfaced, one that seemed to defy even the tentative rules they had started to recognize. This time, it wasn't a quiet town or a snow-covered city street. It was a bustling metropolis filled with the constant hum of life, traffic, chatter, neon lights, and the endless rhythm of human activity. And yet, amidst all this noise, someone vanished as if swallowed by the air itself. The missing individual was a young journalist, ambitious, curious, and unusually perceptive. Unlike previous victims, this person had a public profile. They wrote articles, conducted interviews, and had a growing following. Their disappearance was reported widely, drawing attention from law enforcement, media, and the public alike. But even with increased scrutiny, the circumstances were eerily familiar. No forced entry, no signs of struggle, and no concrete explanation for where they went. What made this case particularly strange was that the journalist had been investigating something that, in hindsight, seemed connected to the other disappearances. They were tracing reports of inexplicable vanishings, anomalies, and mysterious letters, essentially following the very trail that investigators had just begun to map. The irony was chilling. The act of seeking the truth may have made them the next target. Witnesses reported seeing the journalist in the hours before their disappearance, but the accounts were conflicting. A cab driver remembered picking them up, but their GPS logs contradicted that story. A coffee shop barista claimed they had spoken to the journalist, who seemed anxious and distracted. And in an office building across town, a security guard swore he saw someone matching their description entering a room, only to emerge moments later with no one inside. Each witness was credible, yet the events they described couldn't all be true simultaneously. Adding to the intrigue were the notes the journalist left behind. In their apartment, investigators found a journal filled with meticulous observations, sketches, and maps linking the previous cases. Some pages contained arrows pointing from one location to another, with cryptic annotations about shadows, letters, and strange patterns. Other pages were fragmented, with analysts debated whether the journal was a clue, a warning, or a record of paranoia. But its contents hinted at a bigger, interconnected web of mysteries. Then came the twist, a series of phone calls. The journalist had been receiving repeated calls from an unknown number, each lasting just a few seconds. When investigators traced the calls, they led to multiple locations, none of which were consistent or logical. Some calls appeared to originate from local areas. Others seemed international, and a few traced to locations that didn't exist. The calls stopped abruptly the day the journalist disappeared. Patterns now began to converge. All three disappearances involved precursors, letters, notes, odd observations, and occurred in moments when the victims were especially aware of anomalies or mysteries. The more perceptive the person, the more likely they seemed to vanish. It was as if the act of noticing, of questioning, of digging deeper somehow triggered the next disappearance.
Experts began to debate the implications. Was this a coordinated effort by someone or something, a force operating in shadows? Or was it a natural, unexplainable phenomenon, one that preys on curiosity itself? Some suggested a sinister intelligence, a human or otherwise, carefully orchestrating events. Others speculated about chance, extreme coincidences, or even the human mind's inability to perceive subtle dangers in everyday life. Yet, no theory could fully account for the evidence. As investigators examined the third case, they discovered additional anomalies. Security camera footage revealed fleeting shadows that didn't match any human movements. Residues, similar to those found in the previous cases, appeared on furniture and walls. Letters, unsigned and cryptic, had surfaced again, this time with references to locations that had only tangential connection to the journalist's investigations. The coincidences were mounting, and with each layer uncovered, the pattern became simultaneously clearer and more confounding. At this point, the investigation was no longer just about finding missing people. It had become a puzzle of human perception, timing, and awareness. The deeper the investigators went, the more they understood that these cases were connected by something beyond conventional logic. It wasn't merely about solving a crime. It was about understanding a system, a force, or a sequence of events that was actively eluding human comprehension. The deeper twist emerged when patterns across all three cases revealed a potential warning. Each disappearance appeared to follow a subtle, almost imperceptible escalation. Minor anomalies, followed by increasingly strange events, and ultimately, the vanishing itself. The question became, could this pattern predict the next disappearance? Could investigators intervene, or were they already too late? This realization changed everything. Investigators weren't just observers. They were now part of the narrative. Every move they made, every question they asked, might influence the outcome. And that is where the suspense grows. Because in these unsolved cases, the boundaries between observer and participant are perilously thin. As we move forward, the story will delve even deeper into these anomalies, exploring how they link across time, geography, and human behavior. The patterns, the letters, the shadows, all part of a larger web, one that is meticulously hidden and terrifyingly precise.
And the more we uncover, the more questions arise. By the time the third case had been added to the list, investigators began to realize that they weren't dealing with ordinary disappearances. Patterns were emerging across towns, cities, and even decades. And each case seemed connected, not by geography, but by behavior, perception, and timing. The more they looked, the more the mysteries aligned in ways that were almost too precise to be coincidence. The first step in the climax buildup was understanding the sequence of anomalies. Every disappearance followed a subtle progression. Minor unusual events first, an out-of-place object, a fleeting shadow, an ambiguous note, followed by more significant disturbances like unexplained sounds, untraceable visitors, or residues that baffled science. Finally, the disappearance occurred. Recognizing this sequence was terrifying. It suggested intention, as if these vanishings weren't random, but orchestrated according to rules unknown to the human mind. Investigators mapped the timelines, overlaying details from each case. Across the small town, the city, and the metropolitan journalist case, they found eerie synchronicities. Letters written on the same dates, shadows reported at similar times of day, and patterns of movement that, when plotted on a map, formed lines, intersections, and angles that seemed deliberately designed. Experts began whispering about the possibility of an unseen hand guiding events. Something operating outside conventional understanding. Witness accounts became more critical than ever. Individuals who had seen fleeting figures, heard whispers, or observed impossible occurrences were now revisited, cross-referenced, and analyzed. Many began to recall additional details under questioning, details they had dismissed at the time because they seemed trivial or imagined. One neighbor remembered a faint smell in the house just before the first disappearance. A barista in the city recalled a reflection in a window that didn't match reality. These minor recollections, combined across cases, hinted at a complex and deliberate pattern. Forensic analysts returned to the residues, diaries, and letters with renewed focus. Some residues had microscopic traces of materials previously unknown to science. Cryptographers noticed repeated motifs in the letters, symbols, numbers, and phrases that formed sequences, almost like a hidden code designed to be partially visible, but never fully understood. Psychologists examined the diaries, noting repeated mentions of watchers or shadows that could indicate paranoia. But in multiple independent cases, the mentions matched independently, raising the possibility that something outside the human mind was influencing events. And then there were coincidences that defied logic. Maps revealed streets, forests, and buildings that had hosted anomalies decades apart. Locations mentioned in letters seemed to mirror the layouts of older disappearances. Investigators began to see what some called the invisible hand, a pattern threading together human lives in ways that felt deliberate, almost sentient. The question became impossible to ignore.
Was there a force orchestrating these events? And if so, why? As the climax drew nearer, the stakes grew higher. Investigators were no longer just gathering evidence. They were trying to anticipate the next disappearance. They revisited witnesses, reviewed every scrap of documentation, and even used simulations to predict potential patterns.
Some nights, they questioned whether the cases themselves were actively watching them, responding to their inquiries, adapting to each step they took. The deeper they delved, the more it felt like the mystery was alive, responsive, and intentionally elusive. Simultaneously, the public fascination intensified. Reports of strange shadows, voices, and letters spread to other towns. Communities began noticing subtle patterns in disappearances or anomalies in daily life. Some dismissed it as hysteria. Others began cataloging events meticulously, almost as if preparing themselves for something inevitable. The cases had evolved from singular mysteries into a phenomenon, a puzzle that transcended individual events and demanded understanding on a systemic level. The tension peaked when investigators noticed links between all three disappearances, overlapping symbols in letters, similar descriptions of shadows, repeated motifs in diaries, and even subtle traces of residues that appeared across locations. Each individual case was strange on its own, but together they formed a lattice of mystery, a pattern so intricate it seemed almost intelligent. It wasn't just coincidence. It wasn't just chance. Something was carefully, methodically orchestrating events in ways human logic struggled to comprehend. The climax buildup wasn't about revealing the answers yet. It was about showing the scale, precision, and uncanny nature of the phenomenon. It was about raising tension so high that the viewer could feel the unease, the creeping realization that ordinary life might conceal extraordinary mysteries. Every clue, every witness account, every anomaly was a thread in a tapestry that hinted at a truth far beyond the ordinary, and far beyond what anyone could solve easily. As we prepare to move into the next part, the actual climax and key revelations, the stage is set. Investigators, witnesses, and even ordinary people are now part of the story. The threads of the three disappearances are coming together, forming a web that is nearly impossible to untangle, and yet one that beckons to be understood. What will the investigators discover? How will the pieces align? And what truths will finally emerge from decades of shadows, letters, and vanishings? That's what we explore next. Everything up to this point, the letters, diaries, shadows, residues, and disappearances, led to this moment. The investigators, after months of painstaking research, cross-referencing, and sleepless nights, began to uncover a startling pattern. The vanishings weren't random. They followed a logic that no one had anticipated. one that spanned decades, cities, and towns. The connections were subtle, often invisible unless viewed in totality, but they existed. First, the letters. Once considered cryptic or meaningless, a cryptographer finally noticed that the symbols and phrases formed a sequential map, a hidden guide across time and place. They weren't direct instructions, but they pointed to locations, times, and events that connected the victims in ways nobody had realized. Oh, when investigators overlaid all the letters from all three cases, a network emerged, like a constellation linking stars across the sky. And at the center of this network, a single recurring figure, not fully identified, but glimpsed repeatedly in shadows, reflections, and witness accounts. The residues, which had baffled chemists, revealed a pattern under high magnification analysis. Microscopic traces of unusual compounds appeared in all three locations, suggesting not just coincidence, but a deliberate presence. Some residues matched traces found in older unsolved disappearances, stretching the phenomenon further back in time. It was as if the very environments had been marked, primed, or prepared, waiting for the next event in the sequence. Witness accounts converged in a way that defied explanation. Shadows, whispers, fleeting figures, and anomalies, all previously dismissed as hallucinations or misremembered details, formed a coherent narrative when seen together. Each observer had captured a fragment, a sliver of the same sequence of events, and only by combining them could the investigators begin to reconstruct the full picture. The mystery was no longer fragmented. It was a puzzle revealing its outline. Then came the most chilling revelation. The disappearances appeared to target perception itself. The victims weren't selected for wealth, profession, or social status. They were chosen because they noticed anomalies, asked questions, and sought out hidden truths. Intelligence, curiosity, and awareness were risk factors. Simply by being perceptive, these individuals became part of the phenomenon, drawn into a system that operated on a level beyond ordinary understanding. Investigators began mapping the sequence in real time, cross-referencing historical disappearances with recent anomalies. Patterns emerged across cities and decades. Missing persons appeared after subtle warnings, letters, or minor anomalies, then vanished at moments predicted by the sequences in the maps and documents. This wasn't chaos. It was highly organized, methodical, and frighteningly precise. The vanishings were deliberate, almost ritualistic in their structure, yet the purpose remained unknown. The climax moment occurred when all three cases, once thought separate, converged. A shared location, a cryptic message, and overlapping timeframes revealed that the disappearances were linked by a single orchestrator, or perhaps a system that spanned space and time. Whether human or something else entirely, it operated with intelligence, patience, and precision. The investigators realized They weren't just chasing a person. They were chasing a pattern, one that had been invisible until now. Every clue, the letters, shadows, residues, cryptic diary entries, conflicting witness accounts, formed a lattice of interconnected anomalies. It was like staring at a spider web stretched across decades, with victims caught in its strands. The realization was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The phenomenon wasn't chaotic. It had rules, structures, and logic, but logic that human minds could barely comprehend. As the final pieces fell into place, investigators understood the unnerving truth. The vanishings were a test of perception, curiosity, and awareness. The more someone noticed, the more they became entwined in the phenomenon. And yet, the exact method, motivation, or entity behind it remained elusive. The puzzle had revealed its shape, but not its final answer. In this key moment, the pattern itself became the story. The disappearances were no longer isolated tragedies. They were interconnected events, forming a tapestry of mystery, evidence, and subtle warnings. Investigators, now part of the sequence themselves, faced the realization that solving the puzzle might never lead to the traditional answers they expected. Some questions may remain unanswered forever, and that is what makes these cases both fascinating and terrifying. And so, the climax isn't about final closure. It's about revelation. The truth isn't a name, a place, or a motive. The truth is the pattern itself, deliberate, complex, and far beyond ordinary comprehension. Observers, investigators, and even viewers like you are now witnesses to this system of mysteries, peering into a reality that tests logic, perception, and understanding itself. The tension reaches its peak here because, while patterns have been uncovered, the ultimate why remains out of reach. This is what makes unsolved cases like these haunting. They force us to confront the limits of our knowledge and to accept that some mysteries are bigger than any one person or generation. After the shocking connections between the disappearances became clear, the investigators faced a new reality. The climax had revealed patterns, links, and a system behind the events, but it had also raised more questions than it answered. How could it select victims based purely on awareness or perception? And perhaps most unsettling of all, could anyone truly understand it? Or were humans destined to be outsiders in this hidden system? Experts began examining alternative theories. Some suggested a human hand orchestrated the events, a secretive group or cult operating with meticulous planning, manipulating environments, letters, and witnesses. Others proposed psychological explanations, mass delusions, subconscious manipulation, or coordinated hoaxes. But no human explanation accounted for the residues, shadows, or sequences that repeated with eerie precision across decades and continents. Paranormal explanations also gained attention. Some investigators proposed that the disappearances were the result of a hidden intelligence, something beyond human comprehension, perhaps an unseen force, aware of perception itself, drew people in and removed them, according to rules that humans could barely detect. While controversial, these theories couldn't be fully dismissed. The evidence didn't conform to the known laws of reality. The implications for society were profound. If perceptive individuals were being targeted by anomalies beyond comprehension, how could anyone feel truly safe? Investigators became increasingly cautious, aware that simply studying the cases might place them in the pattern itself. Communities began noticing similar anomalies: strange letters, fleeting shadows, unexplained noises. And some residents became fearful of looking too closely at what might otherwise seem ordinary. Despite the fear, the pursuit of understanding continued. Investigators began creating detailed maps, timelines, and cross-references of every anomaly, residue, letter, and witness account. They sought patterns within patterns, hoping to predict or even prevent future disappearances. This meticulous work was exhausting and often frustrating. Many leads ended in dead ends, but each discovery, no matter how small, brought them closer to understanding the invisible rules governing these events. An unexpected outcome of the investigation was the recognition of human limitations. The cases revealed that perception, attention, and interpretation played a crucial role. Witnesses saw fragments of events, but rarely the whole picture. Investigators could trace the patterns, but the true mechanism remained hidden. The mystery forced everyone involved to accept that some truths might forever remain out of reach, and that even knowledge itself could be dangerous. Interestingly, public engagement became a tool rather than a distraction. Communities began documenting anomalies, collecting reports of shadows, letters, or strange residues. Some investigators theorized that this collective attention might actually influence the phenomenon, either drawing it out or altering its patterns.
People who participated carefully,
Observing without interfering,
sometimes reported subtle insights,
glimpses into connections that had previously gone unnoticed.
At the same time, investigators faced ethical dilemmas. Should they continue pursuing answers if doing so increased the risk of further disappearances? Could they intervene, or would intervention itself disrupt patterns in unpredictable ways? The cases forced a reconsideration of what it meant to seek truth, and whether some truths are too dangerous to fully uncover. Alternative theories, too, began to shape the narrative. Some suggested these events were a form of natural selection, testing human awareness and curiosity. Others proposed that the phenomenon was interactive, almost like a puzzle that required participation to reveal its logic. These ideas blurred the lines between victim, observer, and investigator, creating a sense of shared vulnerability and responsibility. In this stage of the story, the tension begins to ease slightly, but the unease remains. Investigators had uncovered patterns, observed sequences, and even mapped the phenomenon. But the ultimate answer was still missing.
The mysteries were no longer isolated. They were interconnected, systemic, and ongoing. Each case added clarity, yet deepened the questions. What governed the disappearances? Who or what orchestrated them? And what would happen to the next perceptive person who noticed the anomalies? The falling action doesn't resolve the tension. It reframes it. Instead of chasing isolated disappearances, investigators now understood the broader implications. A hidden system operating alongside ordinary life, challenging perception, logic, and human comprehension. They had glimpsed the pattern, but the larger design remained shrouded in shadows. Waiting. As we move into the next part, we'll begin summarizing the lessons, insights, and lingering questions these cases leave behind, tying together the threads of the narrative and preparing for the final conclusion. After examining all three disappearances, the letters, the diaries, the residues, and the witnesses' accounts, one undeniable truth emerges. These unsolved cases are connected by something far larger than any individual event. What initially seemed like random vanishings now reveal a pattern, a hidden web of anomalies, cryptic messages, and perceptive individuals drawn into a system beyond normal comprehension. The small-town disappearance, with its diary, footprints, and odd residues, illustrates how even ordinary environments can hide extraordinary mysteries. The city case, with its cryptic notes, untraceable visitors, and technological anomalies, shows that these patterns persist even in highly monitored modern settings. And the journalist's vanishing in the metropolitan hub ties everything together, suggesting that awareness, curiosity, and intelligence make certain individuals more susceptible to these unexplained events. Across decades and geographies, the same sequence emerges. Subtle anomalies precede strange events. Minor inconsistencies hint at hidden patterns, and the perceptive individuals vanish in a manner consistent with rules that are visible only when the cases are considered together. Whether human or otherwise, this system operates with precision, testing perception, logic, and curiosity itself. The investigators' work, though exhaustive, demonstrates the limits of human understanding. They've mapped patterns, traced sequences, and cataloged evidence. Yet the ultimate cause, purpose, and orchestrator of the disappearances remain elusive. It's a chilling reminder that some mysteries are systemic, not isolated, and that seeking truth can sometimes reveal more questions than answers. Even as patterns become visible, the phenomena defy easy categorization. Residues, unknown to science, shadows glimpsed only fleetingly, cryptic letters and diaries. They all hint at a presence or intelligence operating beyond ordinary reality. And while each case teaches something, the broader system challenges our assumptions about perception, causality, and reality itself. What we can conclude is that these disappearances are more than tragic events. They are evidence of a hidden structure, a sequence of anomalies that unfolds with precision, often unnoticed until it's too late. They compel us to question what is ordinary, to examine the unseen layers of reality, and to consider how fragile human perception truly is. The cases also leave a warning. Curiosity and awareness may be a double-edged sword. Those who notice patterns, who dig for answers, who challenge normal assumptions, these are the ones most likely to encounter the phenomenon. And yet, these same qualities are what allow humans to understand, map, and perhaps one day anticipate the patterns. In the end, the disappearances serve as a mirror reflecting both the limits and the potential of human comprehension. We can piece together patterns, analyze clues, and connect events, but the ultimate truth, the why behind these vanishings, remains just beyond reach. That is what makes them haunting, compelling, and unforgettable. These cases remind us that reality is layered, perception is selective, and mysteries can persist even in the most mundane settings. They are not just stories. They are invitations to look closer, think deeper, and question what we believe to be normal. And for those willing to pay attention, there may always be more to discover, more patterns, more anomalies, more questions waiting just out of sight. If these mysteries fascinated you, don't stop here. Click to watch the next video and dive even deeper into unsolved cases that will leave you questioning reality. Even after mapping the main cases, there are details that many might overlook, tiny anomalies and subtle patterns that hint at a broader truth. First, consider the timing of the disappearances. Each case occurred during transitional periods in the victims' lives, moving homes, changing jobs, or ending relationships. It's almost as if the phenomenon recognizes moments of vulnerability, moments when individuals are more attuned to the world around them, more aware of anomalies that others might ignore. Next, the residues. Though seemingly random at first, their repeated presence across decades and locations suggests an underlying consistency. The compounds are unlike anything known to science, yet they appear in the same relative locations: desks, door handles, hallways, each time preceding the disappearance. This suggests preparation, a deliberate sequence, or even a form of communication designed to be partially perceptible to those paying attention. The letters and diaries also hold hidden connections. On the surface, they seem cryptic, fragmented, or nonsensical. But look closer. Repeated words, recurring motifs, and subtle references to time and space indicate a hidden system. Observant readers might notice patterns in phrasing, symbol placement, or the sequence of entries, details that foreshadow events and link cases that appear unrelated. Another fascinating insight comes from the witnesses. Individually, their accounts seem contradictory or unreliable. But when viewed collectively, patterns emerge. Shadows always appear in peripheral vision. Sounds are described differently, yet consistently follow specific anomalies. And subtle gestures, a door left ajar, a window flickering, repeat across cases. It's almost as if the phenomenon communicates in fragments, giving glimpses only to those who are attentive enough to notice. Finally, there's a psychological pattern worth noting. Victims share traits beyond curiosity and intelligence. They demonstrate persistence, attentiveness to minor details, and a tendency to question the world around them. This reinforces the chilling idea that awareness itself may be what attracts them, making perceptive individuals more likely to encounter the anomalies. These bonus insights reveal that the disappearances are not random, and that careful observation can uncover patterns invisible at first glance. Every residue, letter, shadow, and diary entry is a clue, a thread in a larger tapestry that connects cases across time, geography, and perception. It's a reminder that mysteries like these reward attention, careful thought, and curiosity. Yet they also carry risk, as the very act of noticing may as we reach the end of this journey through disappearances, letters, shadows, and residues, one truth stands out. These unsolved cases are more than mysteries. They are reminders of how little we truly understand about the world around us. What seems ordinary may conceal hidden patterns, unseen forces, or systems that operate beyond our comprehension. Each case, the small-town disappearance, the city anomaly, the journalist's vanishing, shows that perception matters. Those who notice, question, and explore are drawn into the pattern, while the world continues around them, largely oblivious. The disappearances are not random tragedies. They are part of a web that tests attention, logic, and awareness. We may never know the full why or how. The orchestrator, human, natural, or something else entirely, remains hidden. The letters, residues, shadows, and cryptic notes offer glimpses. But the complete picture eludes even the most meticulous investigators. And that's the haunting part. The mystery is bigger than any single case, any single generation, or any single mind. Yet there is a lesson in these stories. They teach us to observe carefully, to question what we accept as reality, and to be aware of the subtle patterns that often go unnoticed. Curiosity is a double-edged sword. It brings insight but also risk. But it is the same curiosity that allows us to see beyond the surface, to connect the fragments, and to seek understanding in a world filled with enigmas. These cases, while unresolved, leave behind a legacy, a map of anomalies, a lattice of patterns, and a reminder that the unknown is never far from the everyday. For those who pay attention, the story doesn't end here. Every shadow, every note, every fleeting whisper is an invitation to look closer, think deeper, and question the ordinary. In the end, the disappearances challenge us to accept uncertainty while still seeking understanding. They remind us that reality is layered, perception is selective, and some mysteries may never be fully solved. But the pursuit itself reveals the extraordinary hidden in plain sight. And as you reflect on these cases, remember, sometimes the act of noticing is what changes everything. The question remains, what will you notice next?